Welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. We're here to help develop fleet and transport professionals. Do you want to progress and develop your skills and knowledge? We promise to bring lively conversation and debate around interesting issues and keep you bang up to date with changes in our awesome industry. The Fleet Geeks are a community of professionals, and if you enjoy the podcast, why not join the discussion for free in the Fleet Geek community over on Facebook. To be joined by the Weightmans Team, Sarah and Chris, joining me for the third and final episode in this series, where we're going to look at some of the issues that may crop up during the course of 2024 for vehicle operators and things to keep an eye out for. We're going to be talking a bit about maintenance providers and effective management of those and subcontractors, as well as maybe a touch on agency drivers and potentially around brake testing and issues like that when we're talking about the maintenance provider thing too, and then ADAS as well, which is going to be a bit of a challenge. And I feel like we may have the old ostrich syndrome where we've got people burying their heads in the ground when it comes to thinking about DVS and those kinds of things. Certainly people seem to be holding back before they push forward on that, so it'll be interesting to have a good discussion around what's coming down the line in October for driving in London. So kick things off then. Let's talk all things maintenance providers, Sarah. What have you got in the pipeline when with maintenance providers?
Well, I think one thing that we see with maintenance providers is a lot of blame put on them, and often people are very quick to take responsibility away from themselves and put it on the maintenance provider. Well, they'll say to us, my maintenance provider did it, I should be able to trust them, right? And yes, there is a big element of that, of course, and the people that are doing your maintenance work really hard to ensure that it's at the standard it should be at. But there's definitely more that can be done there, and there's definitely more stronger controls that you can put in place as a company and as a transport manager to ensure that you just have that good oversight over your maintenance providers. And I mean, I'm sure you see this a lot as well. One thing we always recommend is sort of ensuring your maintenance provider management. So things that are on offer are putting an SLA in place. If there's things you want your maintenance providers to do, then you need to tell them. They'll go through the PMI form and they'll tick it off, and that's their job. But if you want them to do extra, you probably need to put something in place to agree that with them. Firstly, talk to them about it. Secondly, you might need to get something in writing to ensure that they do it. And you might also need to pay them more. So it's a commercial consideration as well, because you can't expect more than you're paying for just to be a freebie. So I think that's the first thing, and that's something we often help clients with, getting an SLA in place that might be brief, but it just specifies exactly what you want extra and exactly what you expect from them. Another thing that we always say that is a really good idea is to do maintenance provider audits, and I know you do these, Pete, so we can talk more about it.
Yeah, sure.
But again, it offers such a good opportunity for you to go down there and see what they're doing. If you've got all these complaints, fine, but go and check what they're doing first, because you're relying on them to provide you with a service, and they can only do as much as they can do. If you want more, you need to go and check out what they're doing, and I think that's really important. I mean, what do you see when you go and do maintenance provider audits?
So I wholeheartedly agree. I think one of the challenges I come across is that sometimes maintenance providers can be particularly prickly when it comes to having their standards challenged, and that they think that, well, we just fix the trucks and it's up to you to have... Sorry, I probably shouldn't put a voice on, but you kind of get the idea of, in some cases, the scenario that goes along the lines of, well, we fix the vehicles, you're the one with the operator licence, it's your issue. Yeah. But as you say, I think SLAs are a really fantastic solution. I think documented review meetings on a regular basis. I think one of the challenges when I put my sort of health and safety hat on and some of the advancements we've seen culturally from a safety point of view, when we look at KPIs, trying to advance KPIs to a current measure against a lag measure. So, for example, on OCRS, we particular KPIs we look at in our industry is the OCRS score, and we also look at MOT test results. Now, essentially, that's a lag measure as well. It's something that's been and occurred. It's not the current standard of the way things are operating. So, a good audit will look at certainly the ways and means that the maintenance provider operate, certainly the QC process in place. So that's really important for them to understand the operator license and the training that they're undertaking internally, because they need to understand that the impact they can have on you as the operator, and that's a sort of key consideration really, is how open they are to having that dialogue with an operator. And I think I certainly wanted to sort of mention whilst we talked about maintenance is that actually it leads into this piece around effective subcontractor management as well, because operators have this sort of, they have this duty put on them, particularly with their operating centres, that they'll have subcontractors come onto their operating centre to carry work out. It might be a maintenance provider or a tyre fitting company or a glazing company, etc. And actually there's this requirement on them to ensure that they provide a safe facility for work in, but also vetting those people coming in to operate in their premises, to ensure that they've got effective risk assessments, that have the employees been properly inducted, which I guess will lead on to agency drivers shortly. But that whole subcontract management piece is really, really important, and I think that maintenance providers fall into that. And I think if operators start to push expectations more on maintenance providers, that they have a better understanding of the operator licensing and the impact and how vital they are in that whole sort of ecosystem of making sure the vehicles are safe on the road. I think that could only be a great thing for the industry. Certainly there's been some talk of some type of hygiene system.
That's right, it's like a hygiene rating like we see in restaurants for maintenance providers, and who knows what will come of it, but it could offer a really good opportunity if maintenance providers choose to, I don't know what the scheme will look like, a join up, a subscription, who knows, but it will give maintenance providers and operators an opportunity to then reevaluate themselves and see where they're at, and I think it will see a shift in what maintenance providers companies choose to use, because it's like walking into a restaurant. You don't want to go into a 1-star, do you? Well, you might, but you don't know how you're going to walk out, or if you will walk out, but and then if you see a 5-star maintenance provider, that will put your mind at ease, won't it? And so I think it's a really good thing that we're seeing happening, and we are seeing that people are really looking at this and taking it very seriously, because so often I go to public inquiry and the transport manager or the director of the company go, well, I just relied on the maintenance provider, so, and that just doesn't wash with the traffic commissioner. You need to have that greater oversight. So I think what you're saying is completely true there. And I think definitely with regards to the health and safety side of things, whilst I'm not an expert, I know that during health and safety investigations, often those things are requested, the risk assessment. Did you have one? Why not? And these are not hard documents to formulate and to just get done. They should be part of the process all the time. So that's definitely a big recommendation from me, is make sure those documents are there and they remain there. They're put somewhere, filed securely and safely, so that if you ever need them in the future, you can come back to them. I
agree. I think it boils down to accountability, in that the traffic commissioner expects the operator to be accountable for their operations, but the operator needs to make the maintenance provider accountable and manage them effectively around their accountability around the road safety and the way they're operating. The great thing about introducing a hygiene scheme will be that you will kind of know the maintenance providers, if they're 5-star, they're committed. They're committed to holding high standards, and they're committed to having an open and transparent conversation. I think one of the challenges I come across is many of them aren't open to having a transparent conversation. They will look to blame others when it comes to a real sort of challenge when you start to challenge them around an MOT failure, and you send over an investigation report. Well, why did this MOT fail? And they sort of push back, going, well, it just failed, it's not our problem. That's a real sort of challenge around that maintenance provider for us as well. So there's maybe some changes coming up this year with brake testing. Are we looking at a potential update there?
Yeah, so the guide to maintaining roadworthiness, we'll see those updates this year, and we have heard potentially there's more updates on the horizon, so watch this space. Maybe that's something we'll come back and chat about, V.
Sure.
But it's just keeping a regular eye out on the guide to maintaining roadworthiness and making sure that you know what's in it. Have a read. It's quite long, but it's invaluable to understanding what is required and what is expected.
Absolutely. I think the thing with brake testing is that operators still seem to lack clarity around the expectations. I think there's still a challenge there, isn't there? I know the last update saw there's going to be an introduction of a more robust process, but currently there's this sort of greyness or a perceived greyness for operators around the need for a brake test at every inspection, which is a requirement, and then a meaningful brake test, which the term meaningful isn't particularly helpful because people understand laden and unladen, but meaningful, what does that actually mean? And so there is some grey areas. I think there could be some work done to clarify that for operators.
And I think just to add my kind of part to this is that this is a maintenance shortage of maintenance providers is a well-known problem in the industry at the moment. It's so on the radar of the traffic commissioners that they've included it as a specific area of concern for the industry in the most recent annual reports that they released. So I think there really is a recognition on the part of the regulator that these are not easy times, that a lot of people who were working in that in maintenance providers have gone and started driving trucks for more money. And at the same time, we've got ever more advanced technology fitted to vehicles, and ever higher threshold that for maintenance to hit. We've got a difficult situation at the moment.
Hello, it's Shani from Flagship Partners. We are really proud to sponsor the Fleet Geeks podcast. If you need expert advice or training for your fleet business, make Flagship Partners your first choice. We are really excited to announce the launch of our Transport Manager Academy. With expert development for fleet leaders, we offer fully accredited initial Transport Manager CPC training, CPC refresher, and operator license awareness training, as well as mentoring, support, and professional development beyond the qualification. Our vision is to develop elite fleet professionals.
And it's a problem that hasn't got an easy solution. It's going to take time, but it's operators and maintenance providers working together, coming up with solutions that are going to produce an outcome of safe vehicles on the road. That's where that's what it's about.
And it's not a blame game, is it? And it can't be a blame game. It needs to be, definitely a joint working together to get what we all want out of it. So, and that's just safe vehicles on the road, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think I empathise particularly with maintenance providers, because the challenge is, like Chris quite rightly says, is that the driving roles now, with wages increased to try and in an attempt to fix the driver shortage crisis, the challenge is that a HGV driver is trained relatively quickly. When you compare that to an effective and good quality maintenance technician, and even a diagnostic technician in a workshop, that's a potentially 3 to 5 year process to train someone to do that role really well. And with emerging expectations and alternative fuels and electrified vehicles and all of the different challenges that are coming, it's a very exciting landscape, but also a very challenging one technically for people to deal with. Really interesting. So whilst we're talking about the management of subcontractors and that element, and ensuring that you've got SLAs in place, which I think is a great suggestion, by the way, to introduce the SLAs. And also, we didn't mention it, but I think it's worth mentioning it again there. If people had missed it in the first episode, you've got the Transport Manager Comply element, which helps you manage maintenance providers well, and make sure that they're doing the things they need to do. Let's have a quick chat about agency drivers.
Yeah.
Let's open that can of worms.
Why not? I mean, this is an area. The use of agency drivers has long been under scrutiny, just because statistically, they represent a lot of the cases that end up before the traffic commissioner. It involves something that's gone wrong involving an agency driver. Agency drivers obviously fulfill a vital role in the industry to cover shortages, to keep businesses going, and there's a really valuable place for them. What we have been seeing recently, however, is that the traffic commissioners have been really putting on operators' use of agency drivers under greater and greater scrutiny. There was a case, public inquiry case, that was it was heard in 2 parts, but it concluded in November of last year, so it's pretty fresh, involving an operator who had come under fire for exactly this issue, and it was before the senior traffic commissioner, Richard Turfer, and it was considered significant enough by the Office of the Traffic Commissioner that they not only published a decision, but they released it as part of a wider press report out to the industry, which when the senior traffic commissioner is doing that, it's one of those ones that everyone should sit up and take notice, as this is the direction of focus that they're going to be looking at ever more. And that case, it was, to be fair, there were multiple issues with that case, but in a really basic sense, it was a relatively small operator that had in the past been using drivers engaged through limited companies. At a previous public inquiry, it had given an undertaking that it would put the drivers on the books, get them properly employed. And unfortunately, it hadn't immediately happened. They'd been engaged through an agency, and it was only by the time of public inquiry number 2 that proper employment arrangement had been set up. And the traffic commissioner, so first of all, we have clearly a concern around undertaking not being initially followed, but a wider piece around, well, when is it okay to use agency drivers? And here the traffic commissioner went into great detail into the HMRC guidance on this, and it was quite interesting, because if you look at the HMRC guidance, it actually puts quite strong, firm guardrails around when it is appropriate to use agency drivers, when an agency driver no longer is an agency driver and becomes an employee. If you've got a permanent agency driver who drives for your business and you're telling them what to do, and this is a long-term arrangement, then actually that looks an awful lot like an employment arrangement. And if you're not paying their tax and national insurance, that can look an awful lot like an unfair commercial advantage that you're getting. And the press report the traffic commissioner referred to specifically mentioned, and they used the word as sham agency arrangements as something that they're really going to be doubling down on. And it also pointed to other requirements. Once an agency driver's been working with you for more than 12 weeks, certain additional rights and responsibilities kick in. And there's a huge piece around there. And and I believe this concern is shared by the traffic commissioners, or they wouldn't have gone down this route, is that actually an awful lot of operators out there, particularly the medium-sized, smaller operators, are thinking, I've got 25% of my drivers are agency drivers, and I don't really think about it. I just go to the agency, I use them long term, and that's it. But you're then in a position where actually next time there's an incident involving DVSA or the traffic commissioner or anything at all that comes on their radar, what do you then do if they say, okay, demonstrate how you are complying with the full HMRC guidance on this? And that's where I think a lot of operators are going to be on the back foot and are going to be scrabbling around thinking, oh, actually, maybe we're not. So I think this was a warning flag from Richard Turford that operators would be well advised to look into. Other parts of that are, of course, the health and safety bit, sort of what you mentioned earlier. It doesn't matter whether they're agency or employed. If they are working for you, if they're on your premises, if they're behind your vehicles, your responsibility is to make sure they have full and proper inductions, training, all of the things that you might give to protect the safety of your employees. This is something that you have to be doing with your agency drivers. And this sort of segues to what I think we were going to talk about next. I'm sort of taking over your podcast here,
that's
Pete.
fine. No, that's fine.
You're going to have to wrestle me off this mic if you're not careful.
Let's go.
But I'll just quickly touch on it. In the old days, it wouldn't be too difficult getting an agency driver in and saying, there's the truck, it's a truck. You know how to drive it, it's got wing mirrors, it's got a steering wheel, that's fine. Relatively simple matter. Induction's not going to be a big deal. Nowadays, what do you do if you get an agency driver and you push them behind a brand new truck fitted with all kinds of advanced driver assistance systems, all kinds of direct vision standard equipment fitted to it, all of which you're expecting that agency driver to know how to use, know how to incorporate into their walk-around checks, know what to do when a red light flashes on a box on the cab that they have no idea what it does and what it's about, know how to record their walk-around checks or something simple as that on a company-issued PDA. Whatever it is, it's a substantially different situation to the old days. Mm-hmm. And that responsibility on you as an operator to do that really high-level induction is getting higher and higher and higher. And it's going to get even more interesting, isn't it, when alternative fuel vehicles come in? Have you got agency driver who's ever driven one of those vehicles? Something more specialist, perhaps. You're introducing a lot of risk there. and that risk has to be managed, and that puts, unfortunately, ever greater responsibilities on transport managers, on the health and safety team, because you know when something goes wrong, as unfortunately they do go wrong, this whole arrangement is going to be under the spotlight. So it's I feel like I probably brought the mood down a little bit, but there's opportunities here to really start thinking about this sort of stuff now.
Yeah, and we can help with it, getting policies, procedures in place that you run people through, but you do run people through, you don't just chuck them at them and ask them to sign them, things like that. We can help with that kind of thing, in getting those policies and procedures in place to make sure that you've got a really good operation.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you invite Chris along? Or,
No, I was just here. I just saw a microphone and I just went for it.
Can't help it.
No, fantastic. Well, Chris, as always, and Sarah, of course, I appreciate your insights on this. So you have just indicated that we have got a DVS is due to be updated later this year, and I just want to sort of refocus on that point actually, because I don't want it to get lost in translation. So the one thing is really important with the ADAS systems, or the advanced driver assistance systems, is that we need to properly induct drivers and train them on using them. We need to give clear guidance on when a defect is a defect and not a defect. What challenges are you coming across about, like you say, writing policies and making sure that procedures are in place? Is that something that you're starting to help operators with?
Yeah, well, that's just it, and I think I've been in a few different expos and conferences this year, and been inside these vehicles, and wow, there's so much going on. It's not driving, it's like 10 million jobs. It's really difficult. So it is making sure that any driver, an employed driver, an agency driver, they know what's going on, because how can you expect them to just know? There's so much now. So it's getting policies, procedures in place, but also the equipment you're using. Now, we know that this equipment is quite expensive, and you need to ensure that you get it fitted properly. You buy it from a proper supplier, and otherwise we see problems happening with the equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And buying equipment just off the internet and trying to fit it yourself, well, how are you recalibrating that? How are you ensuring that the equipment is up to scratch and is constantly up to scratch? Because if you start getting those red warning lights and your driver's got no idea what's going on, and he keeps driving it and doesn't put it down on a defect report, and it never gets fixed, and then something bad happens, what happens then? Who's accountable? Well, of course it's going to be the company, because you haven't got the procedures in place to train your staff to ensure that the equipment's being properly checked and audited, if you like, and properly recalibrated. So it's just ensuring that you get the proper equipment, it's fitted properly and safely, and you get enough equipment to make sure you have exactly what you need. And then it's introducing it into your business, and it's training the transport managers on it. How are they going to know as well? Training transport managers, drivers, anyone you have in an internal workshop or anything like that, and also telling your workshop, we've now got this too, because again, how are they going to know to check it if it's not been requested of them? And that's where we go back to where we were talking before about getting those service level agreements in place. If you want them to check more, you need to tell them. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And are you going to update the PMI sheet and all of those additional
and your
challenges?
driver defect report, are you going to add it onto there? And what's the expectation?
Yeah, and I suppose what's the guidance around that as well? When this camera doesn't work, no, it's not an MOT failure, but are we going to continue to operate it until it next goes in? Are we not going to? Are we going to keep it out of London because it's not operational, but we'll operate it elsewhere? Those decisions need to be made, and I think there's a real paradigm shift now around the driver's role from many of the drivers that we have with an industry average age of 55 for driving team members, and vehicles, the advancement that we've now had in that period of time when they first started their careers, where vehicles, you turned a key, an engine started, you waited for the coil light to go out, you might have had a manual choke on cars particularly, but manual gearboxes, and you had a speedometer, and you had a rev range and a fuel gauge, and that was about it, right? And now there's cameras and there's sensors and there's not even mirrors anymore. You've got mirror cams and like I say, there's a lot of stuff, and all of the different models vary, and there's lots of little intricacies for each of them. So there's lots to consider when we do.
You haven't even added in the extra cars on the road, and the scooters, and the pedestrians, and the animals. Oh wow!
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. Yeah, e-scooters. Let's do another podcast on those at some point. Yeah, shall we? That draws us to a conclusion on the stuff we're looking forward to for this year. But there's lots of challenges as ever, and guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your investment and commitment to come on the podcast for the last 3 episodes.
Thanks for having us. It's been an absolute
really
blast.
Yeah, really appreciated it, and I love getting to chew the fat with industry professionals and just sort of chat through stuff, and people get to listen in like they're sat on the sofa with us, or in this case, on the 9th floor on Colmore Road, overlooking. I'm just going to draw the picture for you guys listening. We're literally overlooking the landscape. I can see 3 cranes. I can see the BT Tower. I can see even more cranes that side actually, and a church. It's absolutely incredible viewpoint. So if you're ever interested in getting down to Weightmans Birmingham office, it is some place. So book a call in with Chris and Sarah, and that'd be really worthwhile. But thank you guys for coming along. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope that you listeners have enjoyed it as well. And if you have any regulatory concerns, any risk management you need supporting with, SLAs, contracts, those kinds of things, please do make sure you get in touch with Sarah or Chris, who you can find on LinkedIn or on the Weightmans website. Thank you very much, and see you all on the next one. Bye bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share with your friends and colleagues too. Join us for free on Facebook with the Fleet Geeks community for transport and fleet managers. Fleet Geeks offers ongoing professional development, networking and mentoring too. So get in touch with me, Pete Rushmer, on any social media platform to find out more.